Hey guys, today we step into a world that feels impossibly far away and strangely close at the same time. Imagine yourself in Japan, not in the neon glow of Tokyo, but in the pale mist of dawn centuries ago. The air is still, the wood creaks beneath your sandals, and ahead of you waits a tea house, so small you almost have to bow just to enter. You duck your head. Don't worry, that bow is half respect and half practical survival. Otherwise, you'll smack your forehead against the lintel. You're about to share a ritual with warriors who could swing a sword faster than you can type out a text, but who also understood that boiling water and whisking powder could sharpen the mind as much as sparring with steel. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop a comment with your location and your local time, because I always find it amazing to picture people listening from all around the world. Some in the middle of the night, others maybe just starting their day. Now, take a deep breath. Maybe grab a notebook for the sparks of ideas, and let's ease into today's journey together. You shuffle forward, and the first thing that strikes you is the sound of silence. It's not empty, it's alive. The cicadas buzz faintly in the background. Water drips from a bamboo spout into a stone basin, and the faint aroma of roasted tatami mats clings to the air. This is the samurai tea house, Chashitsu, a place that is more than just four walls. Here, warriors came not to fight, but to not fight, which, let's be honest, probably took more discipline than charging into battle. The tea house itself is deliberately small. You can't swagger inside with armor clanking. You must disarm, literally. Weapons left at the threshold, egos left outside too. In fact, historians still argue whether the size of the doorway was intentionally designed to force humility, or whether builders were simply working with limited timber. Either way, it works. You step in and you're smaller, quieter, and suddenly aware of your own breathing. You notice the floor is clean, but creaky, each step echoing like it's tattling on you. A samurai warrior back then would have noticed this too. Every sound was a reminder to move with care. Think of it like today's equivalent of typing without making typos. You're hyper-aware of each keystroke. Except here, one misplaced shuffle could feel like disrespect to the entire gathering. A quirkier detail: tea gatherings were often held at dawn or dusk, when light was soft and forgiving. No harsh midday sun blinding your eyes, no chance to be distracted by worldly chaos. Just the amber glow seeping in through paper windows. Warriors knew this time of day was special. The mind is sharper, yet calmer. And if you've ever tried deep work early in the morning, before the notifications explode, you know exactly why they chose it. The host greets you with a bow. Wordless, precise. There's no need for chatter. The silence is its own conversation. Your senses are heightened. The smell of charcoal from the brazier mixes with the faint, grassy tang of powdered tea. You're alert without effort, and suddenly you realize this is training, not of muscle, but of mind. Samurai understood something you often forget. Life is not constant battle. If you train only in chaos, you become brittle. But if you can find focus in calm, you'll carry that focus into chaos. That's what the tea house was. A dojo for discipline disguised as hospitality. And here's a little-known tidbit. Many samurai actually dreaded being too good at fighting because endless warfare could consume them. The tea ceremony offered balance, a tether back to humanity. One famous warrior, Sen no Rikyu, elevated the tea ritual into a discipline so respected that lords and generals would kneel for hours just to sip bitter green powder with him. Imagine CEOs today pausing their deals to watch someone stir matcha slowly. It's almost unthinkable, yet oddly inspiring. You sit, legs folded awkwardly, and realize that your discomfort is part of the lesson. Focus isn't born in luxury. It's born when your knees ache, but you stay still. When your mind wanders, but you return to the steam rising from the cup. It's the samurai version of mindfulness. Centuries before apps told you how many minutes you've meditated today. And as you settle into the stillness, you start to see this isn't just about tea. This is about reshaping your brain. One quiet sip at a time. You can almost hear the host's unspoken message. If you can control yourself in this small room, you can control yourself on the battlefield. The brazier pops as charcoal shifts and the scent deepens. You look at the empty cups waiting to be used, and suddenly you wonder, why did samurai care so much about polishing these bowls, about holding them as carefully as blades? Well, that's where the story takes you next. You glance at the tea bowls lined up, their surfaces gleaming with a soft luster that speaks of hours, maybe days of care. It strikes you, these warriors, men who could slice a bamboo stalk clean in half with one stroke, spent an equal amount of energy polishing clay cups. At first, it feels absurd, almost laughable. Imagine a modern MMA fighter gently buffing his favorite coffee mug before practice. But here in the samurai world, there's no contradiction. Bowls and blades live in the same universe of discipline. You pick one up, and it's heavier than expected. The clay feels cool against your fingertips, its shape slightly irregular. That irregularity isn't a flaw, it's deliberate. The Japanese even have a word for cherishing imperfection, wabi-sabi. Each chip, each asymmetry is a reminder that beauty and usefulness can live together, that imperfection itself can train humility. Historians still argue whether samurai genuinely embraced these imperfect bowls out of philosophy or simply because handcrafting made uniform perfection impossible. Either way, the message stuck. If you can treat a bowl with reverence, you can treat life with reverence. You see a samurai kneeling across from you. He adjusts his sword belt absent-mindedly, though the weapon is left outside. His fingers now reach for the tea bowl as if it were the hilt of his blade. Steady, balanced, and precise. The gesture is identical. The tea bowl becomes training equipment for the mind, as the sword is for the body. Here's a quirky fact. Samurai had a ritual of inspecting bowls as if they were artifacts in a museum. They'd turn the cup slowly in their hands before drinking, appreciating its texture, glaze, and even the way light danced on the rim. Imagine you doing that at Starbucks. You'd look like you were decoding an ancient prophecy in your latte foam. But for them, that slowness was a drill. Each inspection demanded focus, patience, and the refusal to rush. Now picture this. In battle, hesitation was death. But controlled slowness, that was wisdom. The tea ritual taught samurai to separate the two. Slowness in the tea room wasn't weakness. It was mastery. It trained them to pause, to observe, to absorb. And that pause, that heartbeat of control, could be the difference between reacting recklessly and striking decisively when swords were drawn. The polishing of bowls wasn't just about cleanliness, it was about clarity. Dust or stains were seen as distractions, little intrusions of chaos into a moment of calm. Wiping a bowl until it gleamed was like clearing the mind of clutter. You wipe, you polish, you strip away what doesn't belong. Tell me that doesn't sound suspiciously similar to deleting apps off your phone just so you can focus on one project. One mainstream historical fact worth anchoring here. Tea utensils were often treated as valuable as weapons. Daimyo lords, those high-ranking warlords, traded tea bowls like they were golden treasures. Some were passed down as family heirlooms, protected like samurai swords themselves. Owning a famous tea bowl could elevate your status, your honor, your reputation. It wasn't just a cup. It was a symbol of refinement and self-mastery. And yet, not all bowls were glamorous. Some were cracked, repaired with veins of gold in a technique called kintsugi. Instead of hiding damage, samurai displayed it proudly. The scar made the bowl stronger, more beautiful. And if you lean in close, you realize this is the same lesson they applied to themselves. Scars don't weaken you. They're proof that you endured. Every mark, every flaw, a piece of your discipline made visible. So here you are, turning the bowl slowly, inhaling faint earthy notes of clay and tea, and realizing you're handling more than pottery. You're holding a mirror to yourself. How careful are you with what seems ordinary? How much reverence do you give to small things? Because if you can't care for a simple bowl, how can you trust yourself to wield a sword? Or, in today's world, to handle your responsibilities when life swings hard? The samurai host wipes the edge of a bowl with quiet precision, and you notice how his hand barely trembles. That steadiness isn't natural, it's trained. Hours upon hours of repetition. You laugh to yourself, thinking of all the times your hand shakes just holding your morning coffee before you've woken up. But here, in this moment, you feel the invitation. What if you practiced small rituals with that kind of care? As the first sip is poured, the bowl passes to you. You bow slightly, rotate it respectfully, and take a taste. Bitter. Unapologetically bitter. The kind of taste that wakes you up instantly, like life throwing you into cold water. And suddenly, you understand. Discipline isn't sweet at first. It's sharp, strong, and requires you to adjust. The bowl teaches you this truth without saying a word. You put the cup down carefully, and your gaze shifts to the steam rising above it. That steam will lead you deeper into a lesson of rhythm and stillness, where focus is not forced, but gently drawn out of you, like a sword from its sheath. The steam curls upward from the tea bowl, twisting and fading like thoughts you can't quite hold on to. You lean in closer, almost hypnotized, and it feels as if the rising wisps are trying to teach you something. Something about rhythm, about patience, about how stillness itself can sharpen focus. The samurai knew this instinctively. They didn't just drink tea, they studied it, the way a musician studies notes or a warrior studies angles of attack. Steam has no sharp edges, no defined borders. It moves on its own, and yet if you watch long enough, you begin to sense a pattern. That's exactly what the samurai were training themselves to see. Patterns in chaos. On the battlefield, arrows flew, men shouted, drums thundered. It was overwhelming. But in the tea house, with nothing but steam rising into silence, you could train your eyes and mind to detect calm order where others only saw disorder. Historians still argue whether this connection between steam and focus was consciously taught, or whether later generations of tea masters retroactively layered philosophy onto what was essentially a practical ritual. Either way, the effect was undeniable. The samurai believed that by slowing down enough to notice steam, they could slow down their reactions in combat, choosing not just the fastest strike, but the right strike. You hold the bowl and watch. At first, you're fidgety. Your leg tingles from sitting folded. Your mind skips to a dozen things you should be doing. But the longer you sit, the more the steam becomes the only thing worth paying attention to. It's the same feeling you get when you finally drop into a groove, working on something important. After 20 minutes of distraction, suddenly you're in. A quirky tidbit slips into your thoughts. In some samurai schools, apprentices were made to sit and watch steam until they could describe its movement in words, sometimes for hours. Like a snake, one would say. Like smoke after lightning, another. The exercise wasn't graded. It was about training perception. Because if you could describe something invisible and fleeting, you were halfway to mastering focus itself. Today, it would be like asking someone to explain how their phone's notification light feels. Pointless on the surface, but strangely sharpening once you try. And here's the part you don't expect. The rhythm of steam became a breathing cue. Samurai hosts would time their whisking, their pouring, even their pauses in sync with the curl of rising vapor. It was as if nature itself dictated the pace of the ritual. You sip, you breathe, you follow the swirl. Before you know it, your heart rate slows and your thoughts come one at a time instead of crashing in waves. Think about your own rhythm. Most days, it's a storm of pings, meetings, rushing, scrolling. Your steam rises and scatters in all directions. But imagine choosing, just for a few moments each day, to let your rhythm match something simple, slow, and steady. Maybe it's steam, maybe it's breath, maybe it's the rhythm of footsteps on a walk. Suddenly, your mind isn't scattered anymore. It's aligned. One mainstream fact to anchor this in reality: the Japanese art of tea, known as chanoyu, was formalized in the 16th century under masters like Sen no Rikyu. His ceremonies weren't just about flavor, they were about pace. Each movement was choreographed with pauses, silences, and yes, even waiting for the right shape of steam. That's how deeply rhythm and focus were embedded into the practice. And yet, the debates continue. Was this extreme attention to tea a practical military exercise, a spiritual discipline, or simply a cultural art that samurai happened to adopt? The truth may be all three. It doesn't really matter. What matters is what it gave them. A way to discipline their focus in moments of calm so that when chaos came, they already knew the rhythm inside themselves. You sip again. The bitterness still jolts you, but this time you notice the way it lingers, spreading across your tongue more slowly than before. The steam rises. The host adjusts the kettle. The entire room seems to breathe with you. You realize you're not forcing focus anymore. It's just happening. You're being drawn into it, like a sword sliding smoothly out of its sheath. And that's when you notice the host's hands. The precision in each gesture, the way his movements follow an invisible script. Every action is deliberate, controlled, exact. You start to understand. If steam was the rhythm, then the host's gestures were the music. Watching him is the next lesson, the next sharpening stone for your own focus. You shift your eyes from the bowl to the host, and suddenly the room feels like a stage. Every movement he makes, lifting the kettle, folding the cloth, whisking the tea, carries the weight of both performance and discipline. There is no wasted gesture, no fidgeting, no rushing, just precision. You realize you are watching a warrior who has turned service into training, who hides his sword practice inside the pouring of hot water. At first glance, it looks simple. Pick up, pour, stir. But slow it down and you see the mechanics. His wrist rotates with the same economy of motion a samurai would use when drawing a blade. His stance is grounded, balanced on the tatami, as though he expects resistance. His eyes never dart or flick nervously. They stay fixed, calm, as if daring the tea itself to test his focus. Historians still argue about this. Did the samurai consciously design the tea ceremony as martial training? Or whether its overlap with warrior discipline was just a fortunate coincidence? Yet when you see how each gesture mirrors combat, precision, rhythm, anticipation, it's hard to believe it was mere accident. A mainstream fact. In samurai households, even the lords and generals were expected to master the tea ritual. Toyotomi Hideyoshi, one of Japan's most powerful warlords, practiced tea as diligently as war strategy. Hosting a flawless tea ceremony was not just refinement, it was proof of control, a public demonstration that you could govern yourself as surely as you governed soldiers. And then there's the quirky detail. Some samurai trained to whisk tea with their non-dominant hand, just to build ambidexterity. Picture that. Mighty warriors deliberately spilling powder and water until after weeks of practice, their weaker hand obeyed as smoothly as their strong one. If that's not discipline, what is? It's the same principle as athletes today dribbling a basketball with their bad hand until it stops being bad. You can almost feel the lesson being pressed into you. Mastery isn't about grand gestures. It's about small ones done flawlessly. The host folds a cloth in slow motion, and you realize he's rehearsing control over impatience. He sets a ladle down quietly, and you see him training restraint. If he can keep stillness here, In the safety of a tea house, he will keep stillness when the world outside screams with chaos. Think of your own life. How often do you rush through small things, washing a dish, answering an email, tying your shoes, because you think they don't matter? The samurai believed those tiny gestures were the training ground. If you cut corners on the small, you'll cut corners on the big. The host is showing you that nothing is just a bowl or just a pour. Everything is rehearsal for your greater discipline. The cloth folds again, crisp, exact, and it hits you. This is choreography, like a dance where every step builds muscle memory. On the battlefield, muscle memory decides whether your blade catches or slips, whether your defense holds or falters. Here in the tea house, muscle memory decides whether water pours cleanly or splashes clumsily. Both matter because both reflect your state of mind. You catch yourself leaning forward, watching intently, as though his movements were secrets you could steal. And maybe they are. The host is silently reminding you that your rituals, morning routines, work habits, even the way you prepare food, could be either sloppy distractions or sharpened practices. It's your choice. The samurai didn't believe in neutral ground. Every act either built you up or chipped you down. Every gesture was a vote cast for discipline or for chaos. Watching the host, you see him casting his votes, one calm motion at a time. The tea is whisked, the froth forming a gentle swirl on the surface. The host places the bowl before you with the reverence of handing over a weapon. And you understand now, this isn't just tea, it's training. It's proof that the smallest, most mundane actions are the arena where warriors are made. You take the bowl into your hands again, and this time, the bitterness you taste feels sharper, clearer, almost like a blade brushing against your tongue. It's uncomfortable, yes, but it also wakes you up to the truth that not all lessons are meant to taste sweet. Some are meant to sting, so they'll stay with you. And as the froth settles back into stillness, you begin to sense the next insight waiting for you. The taste itself, bitter and bold, has its own teaching, that growth often comes wrapped in discomfort, and that learning to savor what isn't easy can be the very thing that makes you unshakable. The bitterness lingers on your tongue, and for a moment you almost grimace. Your instinct is to reach for something sweeter, to wash it away. But the host watches you with steady eyes, as if daring you to sit with the taste. You realize this too is part of the lesson. Not every moment in life is meant to be pleasant. Some are meant to carve you into something stronger. The samurai drank this same bitter tea before battles, before negotiations, before long marches into the unknown. Imagine them kneeling in silence, allowing that sharp taste to anchor them in reality. It was not about enjoyment. It was about acceptance. Life itself was often bitter. Injuries, betrayals, failures, hunger. If you could swallow bitterness calmly in a tea house, you could swallow it on the battlefield, or in the court of politics, or in the solitude of defeat. Here's a documented fact. Sen no Rikyu, the most famous tea master of Japan, once said that tea was nothing more than boiling water, making tea, and drinking it. Yet behind those plain words lay an ocean of philosophy. He meant that life itself was like tea, simple, bitter, fleeting. It was how you received it that mattered. And then there's the quirky side note. Some samurai actually preferred their tea extra strong, so bitter it could make newcomers cough. Why? Because they believed it toughened the spirit. To endure bitterness without complaint was a badge of honor, proof you were no soft aristocrat living on sweets. They trained their palates the way they trained their bodies, through discomfort. You sip again, slower this time, and the bitterness no longer surprises you. It steadies you. It tells you, in its sharp way, that comfort isn't the point of growth. How often have you turned away from tasks because they felt unpleasant? Difficult conversations, early morning workouts, the first draft of something that might fail. The samurai would say, that bitterness is your training. The harder it is to swallow, the more vital it is to practice. The host bows slightly, acknowledging your silent endurance. He doesn't smile, but there's approval in his stillness. He knows you have learned the first half of the lesson, that pain, discomfort, even bitterness are not interruptions of life. They are life. And as you sit there, letting the aftertaste dissolve, another truth begins to emerge. It isn't just about enduring bitterness, it's about transforming it. The samurai didn't stop at swallowing hard moments. They turned those moments into energy, into sharpened focus, into fuel for the next strike or the next decision. Think of your own obstacles, that rejection you didn't want to face, that project that collapsed halfway, that routine you tried and failed to keep. What if, instead of avoiding the taste of those experiences, you leaned into them? What if you let them teach you patience, discipline, resilience? The host refills the bowl, and this time you take it with eagerness. The bitterness no longer feels like punishment. It feels like training. Each sip whispers, "You are stronger than you think. You can bear more than you believe." The room is quiet again, but within you, a storm of insight swirls. The samurai didn't grow mighty by avoiding the bitter. They grew mighty by embracing it, by letting it carve away weakness until only strength remained. You finish the bowl, set it down with care, and in that moment you know the bitterness was never the enemy, it was the teacher. And as the silence deepens, you begin to sense that the next lesson is not in taste at all, but in the stillness that follows. For the samurai, silence itself was a weapon, a mirror, and sometimes the only shield strong enough to withstand the chaos of the world. The tea bowl is empty now. The host does not rush to take it from you. Instead, the two of you sit in stillness, the air heavy with the scent of tatami straw and faint traces of steam. No words pass between you, but somehow you feel as though an entire conversation is unfolding in silence. This is the second discipline, stillness. For the samurai, silence was not emptiness, it was power. To wait without fidgeting, to sit without filling the air with chatter, was to sharpen the mind like a blade on stone. In stillness, the samurai learned patience, focus, and control of self. You notice your own thoughts begin to rise, like restless children. Should you say something polite? Should you ask for more tea? Should you look away? Yet the host simply waits. His gaze is lowered, his breathing steady. He is not uncomfortable. He is anchored. And in that moment, you realize silence is a skill. History records that many samurai were trained to sit in mokuzo, a meditative silence, before practice or battle. They would close their eyes, control their breath, and allow the noise of the mind to settle. Only then would they draw the bowstring, unsheath the sword, or mount the horse. Silence was not weakness. It was the preparation for decisive action. There's even a tale of Uesugi Kenshin, a legendary warlord who once sat unmoving for hours before battle while his men grew restless. When asked why he delayed, he replied simply, "The silence must settle in me before I can disturb the silence of others." To his men, this was maddening. To him, it was necessary. The stillness gave him clarity. You think of your own life. How often do you rush to fill silence, scrolling through your phone, turning on music, talking to avoid awkwardness? How often do you leap to act without pausing, just to escape the discomfort of waiting? The samurai knew that impulse well, and they trained themselves against it, for they understood, in silence, the truth of the mind is revealed. But here is the curious paradox. Silence was also a language. A samurai could insult or honor another without a word, simply by how long he held the pause before speaking, or whether he allowed the silence to rest between them. In negotiations, silence unsettled the impatient opponent, forcing them to reveal weakness. In combat, silence before the strike heightened its inevitability. The host finally moves. Slowly, he takes the bowl from you with both hands, bows, and sets it aside. Not a syllable is spoken, yet you feel as though he has told you, now you are ready for the next lesson. You breathe in, steady and full, and notice something. The stillness is no longer unbearable. It feels like a shield. You imagine walking into your next challenge, not speaking too soon, not rushing to fix or force, just waiting, grounded, letting others reveal themselves in their noise while you conserve your strength in silence. And then the lesson sharpens even more. Silence is not merely the absence of sound. It is the mastery of self. If you can hold silence without fear, you can hold discipline in chaos, dignity in conflict, and focus in distraction. The samurai knew that when the noise of the world crashes in, the war drums, the insults, the temptations, the warrior who carries silence within cannot be shaken. The host meets your eyes at last. No words, just silence. And you understand, this is not empty space. This is the birthplace of every decisive act. The host rises, and with him, you follow. The small tea room feels like it shifts in weight as he gestures toward a corner where the tools of the ceremony are kept. You notice something odd. The tea scoop is not perfectly straight. The tea bowl has a faint crack sealed with gold. The bamboo whisk has frayed edges from use. Nothing here is flawless. And yet, every object is treasured. This is the third discipline, imperfection. The samurai lived in a world obsessed with death and honor, yet they found peace in a philosophy called wabi-sabi. It is the acceptance of impermanence and imperfection, the recognition that nothing lasts, nothing is finished, and nothing is perfect. A cracked bowl, mended with care, was more beautiful than one without scars. You run your fingers gently over the tea bowl's golden seam. It shines like lightning across the clay. The host nods as if to say, "Yes, this is the lesson." For the samurai, imperfection was not weakness. It was truth. No strategy was flawless. No battle plan survived the first clash. No sword stayed sharp forever. To chase perfection was to chase an illusion, but to accept imperfection was to gain adaptability, humility, and resilience. There is a story of Senno Rikyu, the great tea master revered by samurai. One day, a pupil prepared a garden for him, sweeping every leaf, raking every stone into perfect symmetry. Rikyu looked at the pristine space, shook his head, and gently shook a tree. A few leaves fell, breaking the perfection. Only then did he smile. The garden was ready because it looked alive. You think of your own life. How often do you delay action, waiting until things are just right? How often do you criticize your efforts because they are not flawless? The samurai would laugh gently at this. They knew that waiting for perfection is a kind of cowardice. Progress, not perfection, was the warrior's path. Even in combat, imperfection was their ally. A flawed opponent revealed openings. A flawed plan could be bent into a new strategy mid-battle. Victory often came not from perfection, but from the ability to adapt when things fell apart. The tea host sets the imperfect bowl back on the shelf, his hands reverent. You sense the weight of this ritual, to value not the flawless, but the repaired, not the pristine, but the scarred. For what is scarred has endured. What is mended has proven strength. You remember your own scars, mistakes you regret, failures you hide. But now, in this samurai room of quiet ceremony, you begin to see them differently. What if, like the golden seam of the tea bowl, your flaws were not marks of shame, but lines of beauty? What if each mistake was proof that you had lived, endured, and returned stronger? The samurai would say, "The sword that has survived 1,000 battles carries a beauty no untouched blade can match." You bow slightly toward the cracked tea bowl. Its golden fracture gleams in the dim light, and you feel something stir inside you, a quiet pride in your own imperfect path. The host sees this recognition in your eyes. He does not smile, but his silence is approval enough. The lesson is clear. Perfection is not the goal. The discipline is in showing up, scarred and unfinished, again and again. The host gestures once more, and you notice something subtle. Every time he sets down a bowl, pours water, or moves a tool, his body bends slightly, not just toward the object, but toward you. It is not subservience, nor casual politeness. It is respect. This is the fourth discipline, reverence for all things, living or not. To the samurai, respect was not limited to people of higher rank. It extended to the tea bowl, the tatami mat, the guest, even to the enemy. The tea house taught them this truth. Every element in life deserved acknowledgement. The host's bow is not dramatic. It is quiet, deliberate. You mirror him, bowing in return. For a moment, the room feels charged with balance, as though two rivers met in stillness. The tea house is not grand. Its walls are plain, its windows small, but the weight of mutual respect gives it a majesty no palace could rival. Samurai carried this discipline into every arena. A warrior greeted his sword with care before battle, not because it was sacred, but because it was his companion. He bowed to his opponent, not only as ritual, but as recognition that victory had no meaning without someone worthy to test his blade against. Even the act of death itself was handled with dignity, the fallen given honor, whether friend or foe. There is a famous story of Wisugi Kenshin, a warlord of the Sengoku period. His rival, Takeda Shingen, once suffered when his supply lines were cut, leaving his army in near starvation. Instead of exploiting the weakness, Kenshin ordered his men to send rice and salt to the enemy camp. His words were simple. Wars are won with swords and spears, not with rice and salt. He knew respect strengthened his own character far more than cruelty could. You shift in your seat and reflect. Respect is often mistaken for weakness in modern life. People chase sharpness, dominance, quick victories. But the samurai knew otherwise. Respect is discipline. It forces you to pause, to recognize value before you act, to build trust rather than erode it. And trust, whether in war or in daily life, is the foundation of enduring strength. The tea host pours hot water into the bowl once more, and even this act is done as if the water itself deserves acknowledgement. You realize that this simple ritual holds a secret. Respect makes even the smallest task meaningful. When you treat your work with respect, no matter how dull, you cultivate focus. When you treat people with respect, no matter their status, you cultivate loyalty. Your thoughts drift outward, beyond the tea house. How different would your days feel if you approached each one with this samurai respect? Respect for your tools, so you use them with care. Respect for your time, so you don't waste it. Respect for your own efforts, so you don't belittle your progress. The samurai bow was more than formality. It was a way of living. By bowing, you reminded yourself that the world does not revolve around you, that every interaction is a meeting of two paths, equally worthy. That humility tempered arrogance. The tea host sets down the bowl with finality. His eyes meet yours. In their calm, you sense a silent message. Carry respect into your own battles. For the samurai, respect sharpened the spirit as much as the sword. Without it, discipline became arrogance. With it, discipline became art. And now you understand, the bow is not just for ceremony. It is a blade turned inward, cutting away ego. The steam rises again from the kettle, curling like a ghost above the rim. The tea host waits. He does not hurry. His hands hover over the whisk, then pause, as though measuring not just the heat, but the silence itself. This is the fifth discipline, patience. You watch as the water cools just slightly before it touches the powdered leaves. The host knows that rushing will ruin the flavor, just as hurrying in life ruins the outcome. For the samurai, This lesson was carved into their bones. Patience was not simply about waiting, it was about timing. A swordsman in battle knew that the quickest strike was often the weakest. The stronger warrior was not the one who swung first, but the one who endured, observed, and chose the precise moment to unleash his blade. In the tea house, patience was drilled through repetition, waiting for the kettle to boil, waiting for the steam to thin. The samurai learned to sit in stillness, to let anticipation sharpen rather than dull them. There's a tale of Musashi Miyamoto, the most famous duelist of Japan. On the morning of his duel against Sasaki Kojiro, Musashi arrived deliberately late. Hours passed before he stepped onto the beach. Kojiro burned with impatience, and when the fight began, his anger clouded his precision. Musashi, calm and measured, struck once, ending the duel. Patience was not passive. It was a weapon. The host now takes up the bamboo whisk. Slowly, he stirs the tea, not frantically, but in a rhythm steady as breath. Circles tighten, then expand, a dance between wrist and liquid. The froth gathers softly, like mist settling on a pond. You lean closer. It would be easy to shake the wrist faster, to force the bubbles to rise quickly. But the host does not. He knows speed would make the foam collapse, just as haste collapses progress in life. Patience is harder to master in the modern world. Every device, every screen teaches you to expect immediacy. Messages delivered in seconds, results at the tap of a finger. But the samurai tea ritual teaches the opposite. True mastery blooms slowly. You do not plant a seed and demand a tree by morning. You water, you wait, you trust the unseen roots to grow. The samurai trained patience in countless ways, sitting in meditation for hours, motionless despite aching limbs, spending years learning one kata, perfecting a single movement before moving on, accepting the long winters of defeat or exile, and using that time to sharpen their spirit instead of breaking. You sip the tea offered to you. The bitterness lingers, but behind it comes warmth, a depth that only arises from the slow process. The taste could not exist without patience. And now you understand why the samurai treasured this ritual. Your thoughts turn inward. How many times have you abandoned a goal because it did not sprout fast enough? How often have you ruined progress by pushing too hard, too soon? Patience, the samurai would remind you, is not laziness. It is discipline disguised as stillness. It is endurance sharpened into clarity. The host lowers his whisk and rests it carefully across the bowl. No words pass between you, but the silence says everything. Rushing destroys. Waiting creates. Patience is not about standing idle. It is about moving at the right pace, at the right time, with the right intent. The samurai lived and died by this truth, and the tea house whispered it into their daily lives. As the froth settles, you feel the lesson sink into your own bones. In battle, in work, in life, the one who endures with patience controls the rhythm. And in controlling rhythm, you control victory. You rise slightly to adjust your posture, noticing how every inch of your body aligns with the tatami beneath you. The host mirrors the subtle shift, and you realize every gesture, every breath is calculated. This is the sixth discipline, balance. Balance, the samurai knew, was more than standing upright. It was physical, mental, and emotional. In the tea house, it showed in posture, in the evenness of movement, in the ability to pour water without spilling and whisk tea without froth collapsing. Outside, it showed in how a warrior navigated the battlefield, how a lord weighed justice and strategy, how a soldier maintained composure when chaos surrounded him. You watch the host tilt the kettle, measure the water flow, and rotate the bowl with gentle precision. Each movement flows into the next, seamless, neither rushed nor hesitant. The physical harmony mirrors an internal equilibrium. The samurai cultivated this alignment, so their body, mind, and spirit moved as one. Historians still argue whether the tea ceremony was originally a martial training tool or purely aesthetic. But the evidence is clear. Balance was cultivated consciously. Every misstep in posture, every wobble in the pour, was corrected until stillness and motion coexisted in perfect unity. A quirky detail. Some samurai practiced tea while standing on one leg or walking along narrow beams, believing that mastering physical instability trained mental resilience. Imagine trying that today while brewing matcha. Your morning coffee routine would become an Olympic sport. Yet they understood instinctively what modern science now proves. Physical balance enhances focus, sharpens reflexes, and calms the mind. The host now holds the bowl and swirls it gently. The froth spins in concentric patterns, mirroring the subtle rotation of his wrists and elbows. Each rotation is like a pendulum, a meditation in motion. You try to imitate it, and you notice how quickly your body tenses when you rush, how easily the froth collapses under impatience. Balance, you realize, is as much about the inner state as it is about the outer form. Think of your own life. How often do you overcommit in one area while neglecting another? How often do emotions, distractions, or stress tip you off center? The samurai knew that imbalance, even in small ways, leads to larger mistakes. A misaligned step in the dojo, a misjudged pause in battle, a fleeting lapse of judgment in leadership, each could have devastating consequences. Even your modern struggles mirror this lesson. Multitasking without focus, chasing results while ignoring preparation, allowing your mind to waver between fear and desire. These are imbalances. Practicing balance in small rituals, like tea, can train you to restore it in larger arenas. The host places the bowl down, eyes steady, posture unbroken. In this single moment, you sense the invisible thread linking every lesson learned so far. Focus, patience, respect, acceptance of imperfection, and now balance. The tea ceremony is more than a ritual. It is a mirror of life, and balance, you now see, is the pivot on which discipline spins. Without it, even skill, patience, and respect can falter. As the bowl rests before you, still warm, you understand that the next lesson will take these disciplines and anchor them in purpose. The samurai did not practice tea for its own sake. They practiced it to sharpen life itself. The host steps back slightly, letting the room breathe. You notice the careful spacing of each tool, the deliberate placement of the tea bowl, the subtle symmetry in every motion. Nothing is random. Every element is intentional. This is the seventh discipline, purpose and intentionality. The samurai understood that discipline without purpose is like a sword without an edge, sharp but useless. In the tea house, every action, pouring, whisking, folding a cloth, was done with conscious intent. The smallest gesture mattered because it reflected the mind behind it. You lift the whisk, feeling the weight of both bamboo and responsibility. You stir slowly, deliberately, imagining the impact of every rotation. The froth rises. You realize the act is no longer mundane. It is an exercise in deliberate living. Each motion mirrors the choices you make daily, the emails you send, the conversations you hold, the tasks you complete. Purpose turns the mechanical into the meaningful. Historians still argue whether the samurai viewed tea as a spiritual practice, a mental exercise, or a simple routine. The truth may lie in the blend of all three. It was in the intentionality of each movement that focus, respect, patience, and balance found their practical expression. Without purpose, rituals become hollow. With purpose, even simple acts transform into training for excellence. A quirky detail: some samurai would rehearse tea preparation while imagining battle scenarios, visualizing enemies and strategies as they moved the kettle and whisk. The tea ceremony became a subtle bridge between mindfulness and readiness, a way to embed focus, patience, and anticipation into every muscle memory. You can almost picture them imagining the clash of swords while froth rises into delicate peaks. As you sip the tea again, you feel the difference. Each swallow is conscious. You taste not just the bitterness, but the decision to endure it, to honor it, to let it teach you. You notice how easily the mind drifts when actions are mechanical. With purpose, even the smallest task requires full attention, sharpening both body and spirit. Think of your own life. How often do you act on autopilot, completing tasks without thought, reacting rather than directing? The samurai teach that intentionality is a weapon more precise than any blade. Each deliberate choice compounds over time, building mastery where careless repetition produces only mediocrity. The host sets the whisk down carefully, eyes calm and unwavering. You sense that this discipline of purpose is the anchor tying together all the lessons so far. Focus, patience, respect, acceptance of imperfection, balance. Purpose is the lens that makes them actionable, not abstract ideals. And now, as the room grows still and the aroma of tea lingers, you feel ready for the next lesson. Using ritual and repetition to cement all these disciplines into the body and mind, so that mastery becomes instinct rather than effort. You watch as the host picks up the bamboo whisk again, repeating the same motion you've already observed countless times in these quiet hours. Yet somehow, it does not feel redundant. Each rotation, each tilt of the wrist, carries the weight of centuries of practice. This is the 8th discipline, ritual and repetition. The samurai understood that excellence is not born in bursts of effort, but in consistent, deliberate practice. The tea ceremony was their daily dojo. Every fold of the cloth, every measured pour, every whisking motion reinforced habits of focus, patience, and precision. These tiny repeated actions embedded discipline into muscle memory, making it instinct rather than conscious struggle. Historians still argue whether the tea ceremony's repetitive aspects were a form of meditation or simply a method to enforce routine. Either way, the result was clear. Repetition molds the mind. By practicing small tasks meticulously, the samurai conditioned themselves to respond flawlessly under stress, whether in war or diplomacy. A quirky detail: some samurai would perform tea rituals in near-complete darkness, relying on memory and tactile sensation. This forced them to internalize each motion so deeply that even without sight, their hands moved correctly. Imagine stirring matcha with nothing but intuition guiding you. This was a deliberate exercise to make repetition a tool for total control. You try to replicate it. At first, your movements wobble, awkward and unsure. But after several cycles, you notice a rhythm forming. Your body remembers the motion before your mind even catches up. This is the magic of ritual. It trains the subconscious. What once required effort now flows naturally, freeing attention for strategy, observation, and creativity. Think of your own life. Which tasks could you transform from mindless chores into rituals of mastery? Morning routines, workouts, writing, coding, practicing an instrument, all become opportunities to embed discipline if approached with intention and repetition. The samurai understood that mastery is the compound interest of repeated effort. One careful whisk today yields tenfold precision in moments of crisis tomorrow. The host sets the whisk down lightly and bows. You feel the invisible weight of hours, perhaps decades, of this ritual in his calm posture. It is more than a ceremony. It is the forge where focus, patience, respect, and balance harden into instinct. And you realize the next lesson is already whispering in the air: observation and awareness. If repetition teaches the hands, then attention sharpens the mind. The samurai did not merely act, they observed, noticing the subtle currents of the world around them. From the curl of steam to the shift of an enemy's stance. You lean in slightly, sensing a subtle shift in the room. The host's eyes follow the steam rising from the tea bowl, the faint tremor of a tatami mat, the way sunlight moves across the wooden beams. Every detail is noted, every motion catalogued. This is the 9th discipline: observation and awareness. For the samurai, awareness was survival. It wasn't enough to be skilled with a blade. One had to notice the smallest detail, anticipate movements, and read situations before they unfolded. The tea ceremony, deceptively calm, trained this skill. The host observes the exact color of the froth, the consistency of the whisking, the subtle vibration of the table, all reflections of his own attentiveness. Historians still debate whether samurai attention to detail in tea directly translated to battlefield superiority. What is clear, however, is that the discipline of observing minute changes honed the mind's reflexes. They learned to detect subtle shifts in an opponent's posture, the tension in the air, the faintest sound of approaching danger, all from countless hours of noticing small, seemingly insignificant details. A quirky fact: some samurai trained by counting the number of leaves falling from a tree, or noticing tiny changes in shadows over hours. It sounds almost absurd. Yet these exercises sharpened patience and situational awareness, turning ordinary environments into mental gyms. Imagine noticing a single drop of dew moving across a leaf. This was serious training. You find yourself testing your own attention. The slight discoloration in the tea leaves, the micro shifts in the host's posture, the faint creaking of wood beneath your knees, all suddenly become rich sources of information. Observation is not passive. It is active, a form of meditation that binds mind, body, and environment together. Think of modern life. How often do we miss critical cues because we are distracted? How often do we react without truly seeing, without truly hearing? The samurai teach that attentiveness is a weapon. Awareness allows you to anticipate challenges, seize opportunities, and remain composed when chaos erupts. The host sets the tea bowl down deliberately, eyes scanning the room one last time. You realize he has been teaching you without a single word, demonstrating that mastery is not always about action, but about perception. As you sit back, letting the lesson sink in, you sense the next principle emerging: adaptability. The samurai thrived because they could bend without breaking, adjust their strategy in real time, and convert challenges into advantage. Observation prepares you to act, but adaptability ensures you survive and excel. The host lifts the tea whisk again, but this time you notice a subtle change. His movements are fluid, almost improvisational. The water splashes slightly more than before. The froth rises unevenly, yet he handles it effortlessly, adjusting without hesitation. This is the 10th discipline: adaptability. For the samurai, rigidity was fatal. Battlefields, political landscapes, even life itself were unpredictable. Success depended not on following a fixed plan, but on adjusting seamlessly to changing circumstances. The tea ceremony, so controlled and ritualized, paradoxically offered the perfect environment to practice flexibility within structure. Historians still debate how much samurai applied these lessons directly to warfare, but the principle is clear. Adaptability turns potential disaster into opportunity. Just as the host adjusts the whisk when the froth peaks too quickly, a warrior adapts when an enemy shifts formation unexpectedly. A quirky detail: some samurai practiced by intentionally spilling tea or slightly misaligning tools, then correcting the mistake with grace. This forced them to remain calm under small disruptions, a skill easily transferred to larger, life-altering challenges. Imagine deliberately creating minor chaos to train your composure. It seems counterintuitive, Yet the lesson is profound. You watch yourself. How often do you become rigid when plans change? How frequently does minor disruptions spiral into frustration or panic? Adaptability is not giving up control. It is mastering control in real time. By staying present and flexible, you transform obstacles into stepping stones rather than stumbling blocks. The host now completes the whisking with a subtle flick of the wrist. The froth rises, slightly imperfect, but balanced, alive. Every tiny adjustment was intentional, every imperfection accounted for. You realize that adaptability requires awareness, patience, and balance, skills honed through all previous disciplines. Think of your own challenges, a sudden change at work, a relationship upheaval, or an unexpected financial setback. Adaptability allows you to respond strategically, calmly, and effectively. The samurai would say, "The bamboo that bends does not break." As the host places the whisk down, you feel the connection between the ceremony and life. Mastery is not about avoiding the stakes. It is about learning to move with them. Flexibility does not negate discipline, it refines it. Every action, every decision becomes a response to the flow of reality, rather than a futile attempt to resist it. The tea bowl rests quietly before you, the steam rising gently. You sense that the next and final lesson awaits: resilience. If observation prepares you and adaptability guides you, resilience ensures you rise again, stronger after every fall. You sit, feeling the weight of all the lessons absorbed so far. Focus, patience, respect, imperfection, balance, purpose, ritual, observation, adaptability. And now, as the final bowl of tea is placed before you, the room seems to hold its breath. This is the 11th and ultimate discipline: resilience. The samurai understood that life, like tea, is bitter at times. Battles are lost, allies falter, plans crumble. Yet they return to the dojo, the battlefield, or the tea house every day, absorbing the discomfort, learning from it, and standing taller with each attempt. Resilience was not about avoiding pain. It was about integrating it into the very fiber of their being. Historians still debate whether the samurai's resilience came more from philosophy or from sheer repetition of hardship. The truth likely lies in both. The tea ceremony trained the mind to endure monotony, embrace imperfection, and cultivate patience. Daily practice transformed small discomforts into habits of strength. A quirky tidbit: some samurai would meditate on failure by deliberately spilling tea, tripping, or allowing a bowl to crack, then calmly completing the ceremony. This wasn't recklessness. It was rehearsal for life's unpredictability. Every minor setback became a lesson in endurance, preparing them for the inevitable crises that would come their way. How often do you give up at the first sign of resistance? How often do you abandon a task because it is uncomfortable, inconvenient, or imperfect? The samurai would remind you, true strength is in showing up repeatedly, in learning from each small failure, and in cultivating the ability to rise after every fall. The host places his hand gently on yours, a silent acknowledgement of the lesson absorbed. you feel a shift inside. Patience transforms into perseverance, observation into insight, adaptability into strategic action. Resilience is the culmination of all the disciplines practiced in the tea house. And now, as the room falls silent, you feel the quiet power of resilience settling within you. The samurai did not merely survive, they thrived because they had trained their minds, their bodies, and their spirits to endure, to adapt, and to rise stronger after each trial. You stand, carrying the warmth of the tea, the discipline of the rituals, and the lessons of a lifetime embedded into each motion and thought. You are ready to face your own battles, bitterness, imperfection, disruption, uncertainty, with grace, focus, and resilience. Breathe deeply, feeling the quiet strength accumulated from every lesson. Resilience is not about never falling. It is about standing back up, each time stronger, sharper, and more prepared for what comes next. Every moment of discomfort, every setback, every challenge is secretly training you for a breakthrough that is waiting just beyond your endurance. Self-discipline is the daily decision to show up, to face the difficult tasks no one else sees, and to trust that small, consistent actions compound into unstoppable momentum. Limits exist only to be challenged. Obstacles are proof of progress. Each scar, each mistake, each misstep is a marker of growth. Carry the lessons of the samurai in your mind: patience, observation, adaptability, balance, purpose, ritual, respect, imperfection, and resilience. Let them guide your actions. Let them temper your decisions. Let them sharpen your focus. You are stronger than you realize. And as you move forward, remember this quiet certainty. You already possess the tools, the discipline, and the inner strength to push further than you ever believed possible. Every step you take is a strike of progress. Every small victory, a testament to your commitment. So, stay disciplined, keep pushing forward. And if this story gave you even one spark of motivation, share it with a friend who needs it too.